from the southern mountains. Headwaters, a part of Appalachia.
My husband, he worked in the mines, and he got $2.36 a day when they worked. Sometimes it'd be 1 day a week, sometimes 2. They were just me and my husband, you know, at that time. And it was hard on us. But I don't see how people with big families survived. When that union got started, everybody went drawing more money. It was good for all of us. Yeah, that's right. But then after that, they went to scabbing them mines. Well, he wouldn't have worked in the scab mines. They'd have never worked no more. He worked up there at the union hall, stay up there for weeks at a time, and he tried to tried to help take care of the people.
It was all union, you know, then even the truck mines and everything paid union scale. I was getting union scale whenever I went in work and every 16-year-old in the truck mines, driving ponies. Everything was union at one time. Then you had this UMWA card and everything. That meant the world, you know. See, my family was all brought up with that card, you know, and one of them gets sick or something, even whenever my kids is born, he took care of that, you know, and everything. Wasn't that the only thing that cost me, just my gas bill taking them to the hospital. Yet they just took an ocean to bust it, you know. Let it go ununion so they could do what they wanted to and nobody could say nothing about it, you know. They cracked it, buddy. I went to work down here for Joe Osborne, Joe's Super. He had $1 an hour delivering groceries.
Mr. Editor, if you choose, send me a copy of the labor news. I've got a son in the infantry, and he'd be mighty glad to see that someone somewhere now and then thinks about the lives of mining men in Perry County.
What was going on at the time was a big new investment that industry all over the country was making on mechanization of the production process. They were thinking about atomic power. They were thinking about coal slurrying and the transportation of coal in pipes. So they were basically building a whole new system about how coal would be mined. It was almost like all their plans had been made without people in mind. And the people that they had forgotten were showing up in the eastern part of Kentucky. The northern coal operators, steel companies, the auto companies, could afford mechanization. In the southern coal operators, they had a hard time keeping up with the big northern coal operators. You can't put a big old machine into a 27-inch seam and make it work for you, make any money out of it. So they experimented in busting the union. They'd take a whole piece of coal that was being mined by maybe 2,000 men in one local that was under the union, and they would begin leasing that piece of coal out to 30 or 40, 100 individuals. The difference was the men at that time in these little dog holes were lucky if they made $12 a day, where the union scale was $22 a day. Dangerous work, no safety. The coal operator could do anything he wanted with the way the coal was mined in here, and there was no force available to stop him, you know. And you know, you have to look at the union too on that. Union reps would just respond to the grievances that the miners had, if they ever did respond, by going up there and just talking to the coal operator. They had already written this place off. People were starving. The kids were starving. And it wasn't until their hospital cards were threatened that the union was going to take away the hospital cards that I think this roving picket movement actually started.
The coal business was on the rock, and I was mining the coal, loading it by hand, put it in a railroad car, and I was only getting $3.25 a ton for it. The union came to us little miners and let us sign a contract. Yeah, they made sideline contracts with these little miners, you know. You do this and you do that, and we'll take care of the rest of it. We just went on, paid what we was paying. I don't remember what we were paying, about $15, I think it was, maybe. See, it got back down to 12. I paid 12 here a long time. They weren't getting union prices, but they belonged to the union and paid their dues and was members of the union right on. Of course, United Mine Workers canceled all the men's hospitalization and blamed it on the small operators that weren't operating according to union contract. Some of the best friends I had that worked for me, they got involved in it. They cut their hospital cards off, and they got involved in it. And these fellas would have killed me. My best friends that would have killed somebody else from me the day before this happened. So it's just one of them things.
You take a man that's worked in the mines for years and years, what's he got left? Not very much, but that hospital card would take care of them if they got sick. They don't have very much left whenever they take their cards. And I was proud to be one of them. I was proud to be the lady that was hauling the miners' wives around with me. Had guns thrown on us, machine guns sitting in the edge of the bushes and all like that. We enjoyed it, but we faced a lot of danger, and we did.
We usually start at the Union Hall, and we'd meet there, and then we'd start a convoy, they called it. And we'd wind up with anywhere from 3, 5 to 1,000 people, 300 to 500 to 1,000. 2 or 3 men go to a mine and they get those rocks shot at and everything else run off. But 500 or 600 people go there, and it was so good and quiet. You get what I mean?
In those days, we had only one newspaper in Hazard, the Hazard Herald. I remember this one really incredible article. It was in '62 or early '63, I think, a big 8-column banner headline that said something like, "Communism comes to Eastern Kentucky." And I thought, wow, how could the perception of news be so different? There were hundreds of people who not only did not have work, but did not even have health coverage that they had worked a lifetime to pay for through union dues. And this has all been scuttled. And it was spontaneous, and it was based upon frustration and anger that there was nothing else to do if these were your circumstances.
The Roving Pickets. Well, the head leader was Berman Gibson. And he was financed with the UMWA and the Communist Party of America and half of them in the world. Once the leaves got on the hills, there was lots of firing of rifles at the workplace, people that wanted to work, dynamiting of bridges and tipples, and then we had to form the Perry County Committee for Law and Order to try to stop all this stuff. So there were about 50 deputy sheriffs. Of course, my feeling was I got no damn use for any labor union.
People that wanted to work had the right to work, and no one had the right to stop them. That's just a free country. And that's what I told the pickets all the time. I'd follow them wherever they went. I said, now, boys, listen, if this bunch of men wants to come off of the job, that's their business. And now if they want to remain on their job, that's my business, to see that they stay there. And you fellas don't interrupt them.
They said it was time to build a railroad bridge. And I never was about the railroad bridge. But I did haul the stuff in there. I hauled it in there, but I didn't know what it was. It was 122 quarts of nitroglycerin in jugs. And they put it on the bridge and had, I believe, 4 boxes of this big jelly dynamite like bologna, you know what I'm talking about, made like bologna. They had 4 boxes of that placed around it. And they lost their cap, dynamite cap. And told me to go back to Hazard and get one. Told me where to go get it. Tell them send us a cap. And I went down and told them they got a cap and gave it to me, and I took it back. By the time I got back then, the railroad detectives was there. I done about 9 months and 18 days out of it. But I actually didn't know what I was hauling when I hauled it in there. I was framed in that. Well, I wound up doing time, and a lot of them wound up doing nothing. I'd probably do it again if I was to go with to help the union.
8 of them, 8 of the roving pickets, had gotten arrested for conspiracy to dynamite a railroad bridge. And that was this bridge over here. It was the Daisy Bridge. And none of the lawyers in town would take on the case for the coal miners. The UMWA had always functioned here as the channel for the miners. They were the miners' representatives. And when they closed down their interest in this part of the country, they had no channel out. The miners had no channel out to the rest of the world. So that was my main job at that time, and I had to call back up to New York and see if we could get some lawyers to represent them. Because other than Dan Jack Combs down here in the mountains, there was no lawyer to represent them. After the legal defense, we started talking to people about the conditions that were changing down here and taking that energy that was there with the picket movement. And we began to move towards what's nowadays called community organizing. They wanted some kind of representation, some entity that would represent them. And so they all got behind this thing we called the Appalachian Committee for Full Employment. And it gave them a sense of ownership in their own work and in their own thoughts and their own ideas. And there was old Granny Hager, too. She was the one who'd come in and help write the leaflets. And she'd take out these big old piles of leaflets, and she didn't have a car. She would hitchhike all around the country and go to every house and give out the leaflets there. She'd even give out leaflets in Hazard.
This is at the Union Hall lined up. Here's a lady coming out with a sack full of stuff. This is at Christmas time. That's when you stand out there weighing 245 pounds. All night long, we give out stuff for their kids and for them. I remember mine well.
Meat, lard, coffee, sugar, flour, meal, 2 and 3 big truckloads of nothing but canned stuff. I worked up there, I guess, for 2 months, getting not done a thing but distributing that stuff out to people. That's what we done at the Union Hall. We had a basement there and hit plumb full of stuff. Well, and we all got together up there and says, now, we've got to do something or these people are going to starve to death. These little kids, they can't go to school. And brother, we just about 50 or 60 of us loaded up on chartered us a bus and went to Washington. And we met with the senators, congressmen, representatives, and everything they was up there to help us every bit in the world we went to them. All them fellas, we was right in their office. John Sherman come didn't have no seats. I had to sit down on the floor. I told him, I said I wasn't going to come back and see him no more if you didn't get some chairs like sit down there. And he said, I'll try to have some if you come back anymore, boy. Oh, we just had a wonderful time. Met all them old boys up there.
Johnson wouldn't meet us. He wouldn't talk to us. We picket at White House, and after the first day, they come back next morning and said, well, what do you intend to do? I said, we're going to stay here and picket until he does say he'll meet us. Well, it wasn't an hour after that. We see the guards coming over, and he said, Gibson, get you 4 more men, 5 maybe, make a committee, and come on up. We'll let you meet them. So we went up, and they searched us, fingerprinted us, and everything, taking us in.
We got right into the White House, and we met George Reedy there. And we told them that what we wanted to do was to build a community movement down here in the mountains that would begin to pay attention to the poverty here and begin to pay attention to building programs for the people. He said, we're going to set up a program down there. The slogan of the program is going to be maximum participation of the poor.
When I first read this bill, I was then, as I said, a staff counsel to Senator Pat McNamara, and I told the senator that if more than a majority of the senators read that bill and understood it, it would never pass. And that was because it was. By definition, the whole war on poverty and the community action program in particular was a criticism of everybody who had ever done anything or purported to do anything about poor people. It was a criticism of the education system. It was a criticism of the states and the governors and the way they ran their business. It was a criticism of the police. It was a criticism of the welfare system, of the employment service. It was a criticism of the churches. The most novel thing about the whole war on poverty was getting the objects of assistance and help involved in the planning and the administration of the program, the involvement of the poor.
The people from the mountains had been invited in to the White House, and they were told, you can't go on demonstrating and picketing, and what you've got to do is go home and become legitimate. You have to organize a legitimate community action group, and that they would be the direct recipient of federal funds. I think this was very shocking and disturbing to civic leaders and business leaders in Hazard. This whole subject of poverty, which middle-class people didn't even want to think about or acknowledge existed, was suddenly thrust upon us in a way that it just had to be dealt with. Up in the month of March, the Appalachian Committee for Full Employment organized a kind of symposium at the LA's Union Hall. There was a co-sponsorship of the event with the Students for a Democratic Society. This was an SDS-assisted event. One civic leader said to me, because he knew that I was at the meetings as a reporter, he said, watch them, honey. He says, a lot of them are art majors.
I thought it was great, all of them coming in, you know. They come here they was either 18 or 20 of them here one time. They come from the Union Hall. And we just sit down to dinner. And them kids, they brought big boxes of stuff in here, and we cooked and fixed, and we just had a wonderful day. Then after we all eat, we sit around, talk. I played the guitar for them and sung some songs for them, you know. We just all happy, you know, that day. I thought it was great.
What kind of songs did you play?
Oh, well, I just sang religious songs, is all I sang. Yeah.
The Union Hall was filled with people, and people were standing all around outside. At least 200, maybe 300 people. Berman spoke for about an hour and a half, and it was one of the most amazing speeches I've ever heard. Berman was articulating the reasons why people needed to organize. He wanted to see every waitress, every service station worker, every employee of any kind in Perry County organized, that the time had come and that people who had been without representation must assert themselves. And he put this together in a spontaneous, almost like a sermon.
I'd like to see every mines have a union. Yes, I would. They'll have a battle right here in the United States. The rich and the poor will fight right here in the United States. It'll come to that. I'm not going to live to see it, but it's going to come to that. They'll rise up. I said it and I'll say it again. It's coming a time they'll rise up.
We'd sit down there at someone's house in the holler and we'd take out this piece of paper and we'd work with the people about their issues, the ideas of good schools for the kids, money for the men if you went out to work, health care, good roads, and some way of offsetting the overwhelming power the local coal operators had here in the area. So the Appalachian Committee for Full Employment was the first war on poverty, maximum participation of the poor committee to have an OEO proposal for community action into Washington. There was a set date where you could start sending proposals. And we actually had ours in the desk there, first in the mail. And Mayor Daley hopped over us from Chicago, and he got first dibs on the war on poverty money. And I don't believe that at that time we got a penny from that proposal. Because I think it was becoming clear that if you actually gave people power to define their own issues and fight for them, that they would go ahead and do it. And here was a program that was built, written up in the hollows around this country, right there sitting at that big desk in Washington. And I think it freaked them out.
Lyndon Johnson made a trip to Kentucky, but by the middle of '64, the time in which federal money would have gone directly to groups of poor people, that passed really quickly. By the time of Lyndon's trip, the system was in place to distribute poverty funds through the welfare agencies, which of course largely controlled along political party lines. This was seen as a betrayal, that the federal government had betrayed people who had gone to Washington to petition, you know. They felt ripped off and betrayed, which is not to say that the poverty effort didn't include features that people needed at the time. Aid to fathers of dependent children. There was employment was provided, $1.50 an hour, I think.
Well, the Happy Pappies. Here's men, when they were organized, making $22 a day. And the Office of Economic Opportunity presented them with this program. It was run out at the courthouse here in Hazard, administered by the local county officials. It was cheap, you know. It was a cheap program. And basically, it was a program that just gave these men a little bit of money to get by, and kept them off the streets and kept them out of the roving pickets, and kept them out of doing the real organizing to deal with the conditions that they were facing in the mines and when they'd been unemployed from the mines, you know. So it was a cover. It was like from Washington, they just throwing these fellas a bone.
I worked on the Happy Pappies up till they quit picking, up till I was sentenced. He cut the weeds off the roadway, cleared the roads, you know, built bridges. It was a good program. At least they had to clear a road, but now they ain't.
Stickweed gang, they called us mushrats and Happy Pappies and all that, you know. And we'd have to work 40 hours a week, 5 days a week, the full month. And for a family of 7, I made $242 in that full month. Well, I had to pay 76 of that for 106 of food stamps. And I did that for 19 months.
Mr. Johnson put me to work in when he signed that little bill. Since I become important, it gives me quite a thrill. The neighbors hush their talking that I was no good. Since I'm a Happy Pappy, they treat me like they should.
It was somewhere along in the late summer of '65 that the office was closed and that the last student organizers left town. The issue of strip mining and the whole reform movement to change the United Mine Workers emerged. In the end, I guess I remember the individuals. I would hope that every mountain person, business person or coal operator or coal miner would be able to see the kind of greatness in those people. They lost their union and tried in various ways to have some other form of union, and trusting the federal government tried to set up their own agency to receive these funds from the Great Society programs, and it never happened. Never happened.
There's nothing in the mining of coal, I think, that and large capital investments that rewards particularly the people that are providing the labor, and I don't think that's true unless the government is doing something to ensure that everybody gets something of a fair shake in the way of education, health benefits, fair housing, what have you. There's nothing in the American system that says that the entrepreneur businessman has got to provide it, and they won't. The Rockefellers and the Carnegies and the robber barons of an earlier day, or the people that are overreaching now, and the housing people that are gouging on housing, or the doctors who are gouging on their medical fees and their Medicare fees and their Social Security fees. The only instrumentality that can do anything about that is the government. And if you have a government that is absolutely determined to do none of that, people are going to end up getting gouged.
It was rough here for, well, really, it's not steak and gravy right now. But it has been worse, a lot worse than it is right now, mostly due to these retired coal miners, union members. That's the only ones that's drawing a fair share right now. We were sold out, not down the line, up the line. It's not the little man's fault.
William Bailey. He was 63 when he died. Black long. I always thought he was the nicest looking man I ever seen. He was a union man, and that's what he liked, you know.
Mom and Dad, they had it pretty rough around here on this farm, sure did. Now, like I say, I don't know how they raised 14 children, but they did.
He was good-hearted. He'd do anything he could for him.
Yeah, I've seen him carry stuff to people on this creek on many of a time.
Yeah.
Sure have.
Yeah, he'd help people. He'd help people that needed help.
How do you feel about the scabs?
Oh, he hated them. He hated a scab.
Yeah, I tell you, you couldn't sit down and talk to him about it.
Make us mad, he couldn't stand it
and
hard.
I swear, I believe if he knowed what was going on today, he'd probably turn over in his grave.
If you had it to do all over again, would you do it different?
No. No, if it's to do over, I'd let it go on just like it was back when in the Union, you know.
I'm 26 years a miner's wife. There's nothing harder than a miner's life. There's no better men than mining men. Couldn't find better in all this land. Well, the deal they get is a rotten deal. It's mountain greens and gravy meal in Perry County. What operator would go dig coal for even 50 a day on the mine payroll? Why, after work my man comes in with his wet clothes frozen to his skin. Been digging up coal so the world could run and the operators could have their fun in Perry County.